Okay, let's try that again with the microphone this time. I'd like to welcome everyone here. Thank you for attending, and we'll call to order the Monday, February 3rd, 2025 regular board meeting for the Board of Commissioners for Granville County. And with that, we'll call on Commissioner Russ May for an invocation and pledge of allegiance.
Let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for your son. Thank you for his love for us, and thank you for the grace and mercy that you bestow upon each of us. Lord, look after us tonight. Help us to make the decisions that would honor you and honor our community. Help us to do so with diligence and understanding. Thank you so much for all that are here tonight. Lord, I pray that they have safe travel home. Thank you for those that serve our country, Lord, our military, and look after the families of the tragic plane and helicopter accident and the airplane crash in Philadelphia soon thereafter. Look after all those families, and Lord, touch their need at this point, Lord, and the loss of loved ones of such magnitude, Lord, is very overwhelming. So we thank you, Lord, for tonight. Give us a good evening of work, and let us do so to honor you. In Christ's name we pray, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner May. And our first item of business tonight is the consent agenda. I trust everyone's had a chance to read over the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jay, Vice Chair. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Williford. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Have no opposition. Ayes have it. Motion carries. We didn't have anyone sign up for public comments tonight. And then we move on to our finance managers and finance matters, and our presentation of the fiscal year 2023-2024 audit report.
Is that better? Okay. In front of you, I do think that you have a packet now for our presentation summary, and I believe that portions of it are also going to be presented on the TV screens as well for the audience. In that presentation summary, we're going to cover tonight our letter to governance, the audit results, and then additional required communications to the board. So starting with our letter to governance, we've audited the financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, in accordance with the contract that we signed with the county on April 17th, 2024. We did note that there was one new adopted standard, which was the GASB Statement 100, and accounting estimates made by management have to be determined to be accurate, and we did determine that they were accurate and that there were also no significant estimates or assumptions noted in the audit, and that the disclosures of the financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear. On page 2, we noted that there were no significant difficulties when dealing with management and performing and completing our audit, and that the professional standards require us to accumulate any misstatements that we would be aware of, and we are aware of no misstatements in the financial statements. There were no disagreements with management, and the representation letter we received was dated December 13th, 2024. We did not consult with any outside accountants during the course of our audit. And then I do have a couple of other audit findings or issues to note. The first one being that the county should ensure that when a project is completed, a capital project fund is closed out and that any of the remaining funds of that is moved back into its either general fund or parent fund. The county also should establish and enforce proper approval and control procedures regarding the credit card policy. We did note a few items that were out of policy. We didn't see that those items were not allowable, but simply that they were missing the signatures required to keep them in policy. On page 3, we also have disclosed technical errors with regards to Medicaid and cross-cutting programs. Those are compliance findings, and they can be explained further in the audit report. And lastly, the local government commission will no longer initiate a communication, but we are required to communicate the financial performance indicators of concern that we identify. The identified financial performance indicator of concern relates to GASB 87 leases and a budget violation as a result, and the findings that are disclosed in the financial statements for 2024 001, 003, and 004. For the other matters, we receive information from actuaries relating to the pension, the other post-employment benefits, and the law enforcement officer's special separation allowance. We do not audit that information when it comes from the actuary. We take it from their report. Lastly, regarding new GASB pronouncements, there is GASB statement number 101, which is relating to compensated absences. And we just make a note here that management needs to be mindful of the change and ready for that implementation. Now, going on to page 4, we had the financial information over the previous 5 years. So we've pulled this information out of your full audit report. Anything that you would want to see in this full audit report, obviously you can reference back to that, but these are items that we felt are most pertinent for the board. So starting at the top, your total fund balance for the general fund decreased slightly to $48.5 million from $49.1, and your unavailable fund balance increased slightly to 7.1 from 6.2. Your general fund expenditures decreased to $82 million, and your fund balance available percentage of the general fund expenditures increased to 50.2% from 48.4%. Unassigned fund balance was relatively consistent with the previous year, and unassigned fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures increased to 33.68% from 26% in 2023. Going into our next section, you have your breakdown of your revenues and over/under expenditures before other financing sources. So this is before considering any kind of transfers. Your general fund had a loss of $529,000. Your ARPA fund had revenues of $798,000. The opioid settlement fund had revenues of $1 million. The solid waste fund had revenues of $59,000, and the stormwater fund had revenues of $22,000. Next, you have your cash versus your accumulated depreciation for your business type activities. So this would, for Granville County, be the solid waste fund or the stormwater fund. Your fixed assets, your accumulated depreciation. Generally speaking, if we saw that that accumulated depreciation was over 50% of the value of the fixed assets, it would mean that your fixed assets are getting older, may soon need to be replaced. You're not in that situation. The cash was $6.2 million, which is up slightly from $6 million in the previous year. Your cash versus your fund balance or your net position for the general fund, as we covered, the cash was down slightly to $44.1 million from $45 million. ARPA fund cash was down to 2.1 from 2.5. Opioid settlement fund was up to 1.5 million from 492,000. Solid waste was up to 5.7 from 5.5. Stormwater was up slightly to 531,000. And then the cash for other governmental units was up to 14.5 million from 9 million in 2023. And I do want to note here that we're going to have a breakdown in the charts which will cover the breakdown of the other governmental cash and fund balance to help you better understand what makes up that amount. For fund balance for the general fund, it was down slightly. For the ARPA fund, it was up to 416,000. For the opioid settlement fund, to 1.5 million. For solid waste, to 4.9 million from 4.8 in the previous year. For the stormwater fund, it was up to 517,000. And for the other governmental funds, it was up to 14.3 million from 9 million in 2023. Your property tax rates were 0.84 for the fiscal year 2024. There's also a note relating to those property tax rates that we're going to cover when we get to the charts. Your collection percentage was up to 99.03% from 98.99, and your collection percentage excluding your motor vehicles was up to 98.87 from 98.84, so slight increases in both. Your total property valuation was $5.4 million, roughly in line with the previous year. Billion, excuse me, yes, $5.4 billion. And then your total levy amount was $46.1 million, up from $45.7 million in 2023. Next, you have your breakdown of your debt. So your governmental debt's the largest portion is your general obligation bonds, following up with your installment purchases, your certificates of participation, and then rounding that out, your lease liabilities. Flipping to page 5. You have a breakdown here of your debt service payments. For the general obligations, you paid $5.6 million, and in interest, $1.5 million. For the installment purchases, you paid $1.8 million, and in interest, $900,000. And for the certificates of participation, you paid $347,000 with an interest of $263,000. So the total of all debt was $10.5 million, which is down slightly from 2023's payments. Next, you have your breakdown of your general fund revenues and your general fund expenditures. As would be expected, your ad valorem taxes made up the lion's share of the revenues at $46 million of the $80 million. And then your largest outlay for expenditures was education, followed up by public safety, and your total expenditures were $80.9 million in the general fund. Now going to page 6, this starts our charts, and the charts cover the same information that we've covered on the summary of information, but sometimes it can help to understand the trends when you can see them in a graphical form. So you can see that in 2024, the fund balance is relatively consistent with the previous years. It's up from the earliest year, 2020. And your restricted and committed and assigned fund balance is down from 2023, slightly higher than 2020, the earliest year that we are comparing against. Your analysis of fund balance available, as of 2024, it was 50%. This is up slightly from 23, just trailing the group weighted average of 51.79% from 23. And I do want to note that group weighted average percentage, it's always going to be a year trailing. The state compiles those, and so they have to wait a year for all of the audit reports to be received. On page 7, your analysis of unassigned fund balance as a percentage of general fund expenditures, you were up from 2023 to 33.68%. This is down from 2020, the earliest year, at 41.7%. Next, you have an analysis of your revenues over under expenditures before transfers. One thing that I did want to draw your attention to, we made a note that in fiscal year 2020, there was a reduction to the estimated liability for the county for the closure and post-closure care costs relating to your landfill, which decreased it by $2.7 million and increased the net operating income before transfers and contributions for the solid waste fund as well. That is why the solid waste fund looks like an outlier in 2020 compared to other years. Going to page 8, you have your breakdown of your cash balances and your fund balance. Now these are the ones for the major funds. And on page 9, as I mentioned earlier, you have a breakdown here as well for your other governmental funds. So these are any of your non-major funds. And you can find more information relating to these on Exhibit C1 in your financial statements. On page 10, we have your group weighted average of tax rates. As I mentioned, the tax rate was 0.84. It was consistent over the previous 5 years, but we do also have a note relating to the tax rate based on the county's most recent tax revaluation. Has brought it down to 0.631, which will bring it in line, much closer in line with the group weighted average, at least from 2023. And then below that, you have your group weighted average collection percentages. So Granville County was at 99.03%. This is lower than the group weighted average of 99.64%, but we would consider it a very healthy collection percentage. On page 11, You have your debt analysis. So this is a breakdown of all your long-term debt, excluding compensated absences, pension liabilities, and OPEB liabilities. And as we noted earlier, the general obligations make up the largest portion of that at $37.8 million. And then your debt service analysis below that. Again, your general obligation debt makes up 68% of all debt service payments. On page 12, you have your breakdown of your general fund revenues.
Excuse
You can
me.
see there that your...
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I? Or you want me to wait? Okay.
You can see that there's a breakdown of your general fund revenues. Your largest portion of revenue is your ad valorem taxes at 57%, followed up by your sales and other taxes at 21.4%. And then on page 13, your general fund expenditures, you have education at 26.68%, followed up by public safety at 18.37%. On page 14, this starts our additional required communications. So these are items which were required by the LGC to notify the board of. You will have 60 days from the date of this presentation to respond to the LGC. So the first item that we're going to discuss is the financial performance indicator of concern relating to budget violations. The budget violations were a result of the 44 new leases that the county entered. These leases are applicable to GASB 87, and because the county did not make an adjustment for GASB 87, it was not able to see the impact of that before the budget was closed for fiscal year 24. For finding number 2024-001, which is a correction in previously issued financial statements, this relates to a Medicaid hold harmless payment that was received and should have been receivable at June 30th, 2023, in an amount of $171,000. In 2024-003, fund management, it states that in accordance with the general statutes of North Carolina and the grant contract from the Office of State Budget and Management, those grant funds should have been accounted for in a separate fund and the accounting structure within the recipient central accounting or grant management system. And lastly, finding 2024-004, cross-cutting requirements from DSS. This notes that for the Division of Social Services Fiscal Manual, computer equipment acquisition plans must be filed with the Performance Management section, and a copy of the approval memorandum should be retained for audit purposes, which we noted that it had not been filed with DHHS during the fiscal year. That concludes the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, and Commissioner May has a question. Your question was answered. Does anyone else have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
On page 13, I just want to ask in reference to the breakdown of expenditures. Some reason I've been thinking that amount for education has been in the 30s. Does this number reflect a decrease of previous year?
I think the best way that we'll be able to compare that will be looking on page 5. So this chart only reflects the current fiscal year under audit, but on page 5, there's a breakdown of the general fund expenditures over the previous 5 fiscal years. And if we look here, education expenditures actually increased and has steadily increased over the previous 5 years. It was $21.5 million in 2024, up from $21.4 million in 2023. I think that what might be contributing to that could be expenditures in other departments or functions also costing more. And so while the percentage of that expenditures is decreasing, the amount of expenditures has not decreased.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Along those lines, County Manager, maybe you can answer this, or Ms. Beard. This figure is without debt services.
That's correct. That's just operating funding.
So if you add the debt services, I would be correct in saying that shoots the percentage up.
I think that's right. And in our joint meeting the other night with the school board, we did package those together because they really are all school related, and that does send it north of 30%.
One last question or comment. Apologize. Page 11. When we look at our general fund debt analysis, in comparison to other counties, is that healthy?
I can't really speak to the comparison of other counties without the information in front of me, but what I would perhaps refer you to is in the notes to the financial statements. There's a calculation which we have for the legal debt margin, and the county is well below its legal debt margin.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have any questions? If not, thank you. And our next order of business is to request for approval. Do we have anybody who wants to make a motion to approve the findings of and the presentation of the 23-24 audit report?
I'll move for approval.
Mr. Chairman, you and I sit on the audit committee, and we've been through this a couple of times. I will make a motion that we approve it.
Then I'll second it.
All right, we have a second in two places. We have Commissioner Jay and we have Commissioner Karen that offered a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say, we have no opposition, motion carries. Thank you. And now, we have public health matters. And we're looking at the item 9, allocate opioid settlement funding to the Granville County Sheriff's Office. And this is on page 325. If you're following on your computer or following by the booklet.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Hazlett. I am the Substance Use Prevention and Treatment Program Manager for Granville-Vance Public Health, and I am facilitating the Opioid Advisory Committee. I am here to basically introduce the 3 allocations that we are discussing tonight. They have been brought forth to the Opioid Advisory Committee. Budgets have been reviewed and discussed, and all 3 were unanimously voted to bring to your attention for approval for continued funding. So I guess the first matter is the Granville County Sheriff's Office, and we're going to see up on the slides, you see that we're in the 2/3 of the way through the fiscal year of 25, and to date, not a dime has been spent of that initial allocation. I want to remind the commissioners that the opioid settlement fund is reimbursement-based, and it's not a grant that just simply gets handed over to the projects, but that as money gets spent of the allocation that's been approved, that gets reimbursed. So whatever is not spent of the allocation stays in the kitty, okay? So the next slide indicates that this is one of the strategies of the option A of the opioid memorandum of agreement, based of the North Carolina memorandum of agreement. It is an effective strategy. It's a proven evidence-based strategy that we are anxious to get going. We're excited about this strategy because it's addressing a high-use and high-risk population in helping folks get their opioid addiction treated. So we are hoping to get approval, and the idea of the continued funding is to give you a sense of the results, demonstration of the effectiveness of this program, and that's why the advisory committee has recommended an extension of 2 years. I'm now going to introduce Dr. Susan Auger, who will explain the method of the induction of the medication for opioid use disorder program.
Good evening. It is nice to be back again. And as you may recall, I think I mentioned that I like to think in pictures. So I have a visual for you, a diagram to help you walk through what the MOUD induction program entails. There are essentially 4 phases, if you will. At booking, there's a pre-qualification process, and just as kind of a reminder note, this program includes funding for an LCAS, which is an addiction specialist, which we have here with us tonight, Jessica Stone, as well as a QP, which is a qualified professional doing groups. So I'll mention the roles of those as we walk through the phases. So the first phase at booking is a pre-qualification to see whether or not they might be a candidate for the MOUD program. One of the criteria is that they be a Granville resident, so this program is for Granville residents. If they make it through that threshold, then there is if they're pre-qualified, and here's another important point, if they're interested in MOUD, this is not one of the programs that are forcing people into this kind of pathway. One of the other criteria is that it's by choice. So if they're qualified and they're choosing, then they get a deeper clinical assessment along with medical screening to assess what the medications might be involved. And then the third phase is during incarceration. They're provided the medication and trying to get that stabilized and managed, along with counseling and other kinds of support for reentry. And then upon reentry, there is a phase where they're working and the QP would be working in that third phase while they're incarcerated. Upon release, that would be services. They have a person-centered plan that is developed for reentry and recovery, and the transition between incarceration and their community-based Vance recovery provider, as well as other kind of recovery supports, would be set up, and the person would be followed for up to 6 months. That's pretty much an overview. Are there any questions about the program itself? During the incarceration, the one thing that's unique about Granville is they have the facilities to be able to do groups, which is uncommon in some of the other older jails. So part of the counseling and support could be different types of group therapy as well as individual with the QP provider. So that's another unique feature. And the other thing that I will say, I think that is important, is if somebody is, which gets to the comprehensiveness of this and I think the unique design, if the person is pre-qualified or at the pre-qualification at booking, if they're not qualified for the MOUD, but they do have a substance use problem, or if they have a mental health problem, they can get referred to the Stepping Up services for mental health and substance use support services. And if the person does have an addiction, a MOUD issue, but doesn't want to go in the program, they can still be referred to a Stepping Up person to get peer support services and other kinds of perhaps group work.
What role does Visions play?
Pardon?
What role in this does Visions play? Does Vision play a role in this at all as far as once they leave?
So we have the Visions potentially could play a part upon reentry. So there would be a bridge. The primary people providing services while the person is incarcerated for the program would be Central Community Services, who would be providing peer support, and Vance Recovery. But they might collaborate once the person is released.
I just don't, there are 3 proposals here, and so I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah.
So just going to make sure that, so Johnny gets out. Mm-hmm. Who's tracking him?
So that would be the peer support person. And that's the person who would follow the individual up to 6 months. Sometimes a person may go into treatment outside of the county. There might be some other reasons why they wouldn't be able to track the full 6 months, but it's designed to track up to 6 months.
So once they start the tracking process, are they still being medicated?
Yes.
Okay. and you must be a Granville resident. So if we have a inmate, inmates, are you a resident when you become an inmate of the jail?
I don't believe that's true. Right.
For us, in our standpoint, it won't be any inmates we're taking from other jails. So inmates that we will house for other facilities or counties, they're still responsible for what they got going on. We only focus on Granville County.
Right, I just want to make sure that we don't end up becoming the place of deposit for this program.
Yes, no.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say, as I look at the flow of these services, and just so happy to see the extent of it, happy to see, with the pre-qualification all the way through the time in jail and then out, just happy that these funds were available so that we could provide such a comprehensive program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
One quick question. Does this, at one point, we were working on a contract with Southern Health Partners, and there was some question of whether there was bleed over from this implementation affecting that as a downstream consequence. Has that all been hashed through?
I would say from my vantage point, not quite yet. We have a call scheduled this week, I think, with Southern Health Partners to go over the details of their proposed amendment. I think it helps me anyway, to see sort of and hear again about the qualified professional and what services that person would be delivering as part of this program, because that will help us make sure we're not duplicating anything in the Southern Health Partners jail health contract.
So my follow-up question to that, Mr. Chair, may I? Yes. My follow-up question to that is that the funding here is coming from opioid funding. Are we going to have additional obligations that then going to come from from Southern health providers, that's going to come from the other contract outside of this? I mean, that's something we need to know, because I would want all this to be packaged as a opioid program being paid for by this, and not be surprised later that we would have additional funding, encumbered funding out of the detention or the lack of better terms, the jail's budget, which again, in my view, would be unacceptable, because I want all the funding for this program to be all in one out of the opioid settlement.
And I could further speak to that. That's an excellent question, and that was discussed at the meeting that we had this past week. This, as we discussed, Mr. Cummings stated at the meeting that we're going to have here in 2 weeks, we should be able to address a lot of that. But at the end of the day, if a case manager is required, opioid funds can't support that. So there would be no extra burden to the county if it is required that we have a case manager. And that is the issue at hand right now, based on the contract that they've introduced. Now, their statement is that case manager is required regardless of the opioid program. But I also understand that there is funding available to support that also as a side piece.
Excuse me, Board, out of the settlement.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure, for this commissioner, and I think others do, want to make sure that we know what we're exactly committing to, that we're committing to the settlement funding, taking care of the presentations of information packages of different funding streams tonight, and that any additional funding that would be incurred possibly by the caseworker, that if you guys would either have to go back to the opioid board to see if additional funding is needed, but that would not be something that would be encumbered. In other words, we're not taking on additional expenses.
Correct. So the
county itself.
That's correct. And that'll be the further discussion, but there will be no additional burden on the county for that position.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further questions? Anyone else have questions or comments? I have one, and it's for our attorney, Mr. Wren. What's the memorandum of understanding does this have to be modified, or can we go under the current?
It will have to be modified to reflect these changes because this increases the performance term, as I recall. I don't have it in front of me, but I recall it was a 1-year memorandum of understanding or slightly more than 1 year. And this would be adding the 2 additional years and what is an additional $252,000 per year for those additional years. So I think it would have to be extended and that additional funding built into it.
Would this need to be done before a vote or approval, or can it be done after, if we have a motion and approval?
I think it can be done afterwards. It's not
Okay.
unusual for us to do that.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear that up. Any further questions, comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the recommendation as written on page 326 in our packet from the Opioid Advisory Committee and the county manager, that we'd accept their recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Cozart. We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Jay. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes. Go ahead. Yes, I'd like to see if we could amend that motion to include that if any additional funding is required, that it not be encumbered upon the county, but it be encumbered upon the opioid settlement for the case management.
So my question on that, from a discussion point, we're only authorizing a certain amount of expenditure of funds, and if it's a different number, then do we have to come back? Or can we make it contingent upon? Because I don't want this downstream effect. We're going to do a great program, and I'm not saying it's not a great program, but if it turns out that we have to buy XYZ to make it happen, XYZ needs to be rolled into the product. Does that make sense?
I think what you're saying makes sense. What I'm not clear on, are you saying that should come back at a later date for that, or?
Well, the spirit of my motion is that if anything else is needed from the county, it would come back for this board's approval. My motion.
The opioid settlement.
Right. So
That the board intends to, because the board will have to vote on it at that
Sure,
time,
at
once it
that
knows
time.
what the obligation is. So that time, it would be the board's intent that if anything else gets appropriated, it would come from opioid settlement funds.
That's my motion.
Mr. Chairman, what Commissioner May is saying, I'll amend my motion with that spirit of that conversation that he just gave.
How about
Yeah.
the second? Are you in concurrence?
I am in concurrence.
Thank you. And is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, let's go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And all those opposed? We have no opposition. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And now on to our next order of business is to allocate opioid settlement funding to Granville Health Systems. And this is on page 332. Do we have someone? Oh, okay.
I'm
Thank
your
you.
MC for a few minutes. Director Lisa Harrison is here, and I'm sure she will speak on behalf of the budget before you. But again, this was a budget that was put in front of the Opioid Advisory Committee, also voted on, unanimously approved. Important that we are seeking funding for a continuation of 2 years and then some, because to be perfectly honest, it's reflective of my salary and benefits and appointment costs. So without further ado, I will let Lisa Harrison take over this conversation.
Thank you, Kathy. And this is still Granville Health Systems.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So,
so
but
sorry.
for both cases, I think that the issue is the timeline. So you can stay on point with that.
All right, yeah, my apologies. So I don't believe anybody's here from the hospital, but they have, I can tell you that of the $293,000 that has been allocated for their first year, and again, we're amending that contract to end June 30th of 2025, and then extending, so we're all on the same fiscal year, June 30th, 2027. So of that initial 293, they have spent approximately 61,000, and that was on the purchase of a vehicle and insurance for that vehicle. So that is all that has been spent. And you have the budget in front of you in terms of the items. They are anxious to get started. I know that they're in the process of interviewing their community paramedics and peer support individuals. So that is my understanding where that is at this point. And looking forward to probably a March 1st implementation date, as I understand it from Adam McConnell. Any questions I might be able to answer for you?
Before I open the floor for discussions, I want to ask the attorney again, the same questions we had with the Sheriff's Department about the memorandum of understanding. That can be amended
after the board meeting. So as I understand it, on page 332, the current appropriated amount that's reflected in the current contract is $293,000. Is that correct? And so what we would be doing is amending the contract. I believe I heard her say to end, the first year of the term would end June 30th, 2025. And following that, for year two, there would be an appropriated amount of $237,268.84 for 25-26. And then for year three, an appropriated amount of $245,204.65 for the third year of the term of the contract. So we would be extending the contract term essentially by 2 years, although there's a slight adjustment for the first year, but it's extending it essentially by 2 years, and then appropriating the additional amounts for each of those 2 years as well. And there's no problem with amending that after the board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Now, do we have any questions? Open the floor up for discussion, questions. And I want to remind everyone that this is the same as the Sheriff's Department. It's not funds that we give them a check. This is reimbursable for their expenses. So, any questions from anyone? If not, do we hear a motion?
Move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Karen, move for approval.
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Williford. Is there any discussion on the motion? Being no discussion on the motion, then we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And now, next is to allocate opioid settlement funding to the Granville-Vance public health system. So somebody can get paid.
Thank you, Kathy, and it's good to be with you all tonight. I'm just adding a similar request for the timeline extension for these originally requested funds. I think our Opioid Advisory Committee and Kathy Hazlett's leadership has learned a lot in our first year of really digging into being able to request these funds and ensure that we have the resources that we need and human assets to get the work accomplished. And so in the January meeting of the Opioid Advisory Committee, concern had been expressed by both Granville Health Systems and the Sheriff's Office regarding the challenge to hire some staff to get the work accomplished in their original proposals. And we at Granville-Vance Public Health have the same concern that over time, we're gonna need an additional 2 years to make sure that we can keep this important work going and stick with the evidence-based strategies as outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding from the state. So this request, as you have before you, is like the other two requests. It is also receipts-based, and it just allows us a little bit more time to get the work accomplished and for Kathy to offer consultation, technical assistance, and evaluation to those projects that you've just heard about. So thank you for your consideration. We're glad to answer any questions, either about opioid advisory committee work, and you see many of us here on the front row representing that group. There are some of you who represent that group as well, so thank you.
Thank you. And before I open the floor for discussion, Attorney Wren, do we have a memorandum of understanding with Vance Granville Public Health?
We do, and we can do the same.
It
same
will be
thing
the
with
same as others. Okay,
Right.
thank you. Just wanted to make sure we had that covered. Now, does anyone have any questions? Any comments? Okay, hearing no question or comments, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I offer motion that we accept the opioid committee request for Granville Health Center.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second by, and now, is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. And now our next matter of business is Senior Services in-home aid contract with Avid Health at Home. And Miss Kathy May. And I think you're a little bit excited about this one, aren't you? If you will, turn your microphone on. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through the Home and Community Care Block Grant, we have funding allocated to provide personal care services to individuals in their homes who are the most medically unstable and require a high level of care to remain safely at home. These community-based services are designed to help delay or prevent institutionalization, relieve family caregiver burden, and prevent elder abuse. We provide this service by contracting with licensed home care agencies who are staffed with certified nursing assistants. Over the past year, changes within the 2 home health agencies that we contract with have resulted in frontline staff shortages for them. Therefore, these 2 agencies together have been unable to adequately serve Granville County seniors at the level that we need. We have recently found another home care agency that we would like to add to the other 2 agencies currently being used. The new agency is called Avid Health at Home, and we have had several productive meetings with their management staff. The addition of this new agency will allow us to access another pool of certified nursing assistants, enabling us to serve more families. The contract that is in your agenda was developed by our county attorney, and I'm asking for your approval so we can begin our partnership with them.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I guess some questions, but just general information I'd like to get after we vote on this.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for a motion, I'd just like to, say before I make my motion, Ms. May, you said something that really strikes close to home. Services that we can provide to people to delay or at least prevent them from having to go into institution means so much to our seniors and others who can. And so I want to offer a motion that we approve the recommendation coming from Ms. May, our Senior Services Director, to contract with Avid Health at Home for these grant funds to help us out with the service.
I'll second Commissioner Cozart's motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Cozart, a second by Commissioner Williford. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. And Commissioner May, you had...
Hey, Ms. May, can't come and get by without getting the question, can you?
First of all, one of the things that I don't know if Ms. May mentioned or not, but in regards to this service, it's already budgeted, so it's not asking for additional funding. So thank you for doing that. How does one qualify for this? How does one qualify for this?
I'm sorry, my microphone had gone off. They have to be over the age of 60, be a Granville County resident, and have a medically unstable health issue, that they have to be able to have this is not 24-hour care, it's not even 8-hour care. They have to have other family members in place or other care. This is really more about helping them bathe, dress, personal care, and every person is looked at when they are referred. It's looked at on an individual basis. Sometimes we have a social worker and a registered nurse. They go out and make a home visit when someone is referred, and they decide based on a lot of different factors what the best way to serve these people are. Another option might be a voucher that would be available where the family could hire their own people to come in. But if it's determined that this is the best option, then at least now we had gotten to the point that the home care agencies could not provide any additional staff, so we could not add. We are currently down to only serving 16 people. We've served so far this year almost 2,000 hours, but we really have to get something to so that we have more staff available to serve them. Did that answer your question?
It did. So if a resident would like this service, or one could come maybe from social services based on their
Yes.
observation, or
Yes.
law enforcement based on their observation,
Yes.
or in a number of ways, but or through the senior center, correct?
Right, that's right.
So-
the referral would go to our social worker,
Okay.
and that's where it all starts.
I think as commissioners, as much as we can educate our seniors on services that are available, and using that conduit out of the senior center and promoting it, I think we would benefit all our residents more. Thank you for what you do, Ms. May. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And now, moving on to planning matters. Okay, would y'all like to come down? Yes. All right. Thank you. And what we have before us tonight is a evidentiary hearing regarding Jones Road major special use permit application for proposed wireless telecommunications tower. And this is on page 369 of your agenda, gentlemen. This is submitted by Tower Company 2013 LLC for the location of a wireless telecommunications facility with a fenced equipment compound on property owned by Thomas A. Jameson, located off James Road in Granville County, North Carolina. And I will entertain a motion to open the hearing.
Make a motion, we begin.
We have a motion and a second to open the hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Both proponents and opponents of the permit will be given an opportunity to present evidence and arguments. At this time, all those wishing to speak or present evidence for or against the proposed major special use permit, please come forward and be sworn in now. only those individuals who are sworn in will be allowed to address the board. So if you believe there's any chance you may want to present evidence on this case, please come forward at this time. Okay.
Can you please state your name for the record, starting with you?
Barry Baker, Granville County Planning Director.
David Brown, Manager, Verizon.
Susan Raybold, Cityscape Consultants.
Anthony Bologna, attorney on behalf of Tower Co. and Tower Com.
Michael Berkowitz, MPB Real Estate.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence and information you shall give to the Granville County Board of Commissioners shall bear relevance to and be pertinent to the issue before the Granville County Board of Commissioners?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Baker, will you give us a preliminary statement of the case?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. As the chair has mentioned, this is a request to permit a 300-foot guide wireless telecommunication tower with a fence compound on property owned by Thomas Jameson on Jones Road. Jones Road is generally in the Dexter community, northeast of the city of Oxford. I want to state that all public notice as required for tonight's hearing have been accomplished for this hearing. Tonight, you'll hear from the county's consultant, Cityscape, Mrs. Susan Raybold. In their report, they had 3 recommended conditions. The applicant has signed their affirmation towards the conditions if the Board of Commissioners are of a mind to approve the major special use permit. One of them is, at the county's discretion, the tower antennas and all other ancillary equipment mounted on the tower shall be painted a color deemed at least visually obtrusive. That would be a non-reflective color. If a valid complaint of interference to an authorized county or municipal public safety radio facility is found to be associated with Verizon installation at the proposed facility, the applicant shall comply with all applicable rules regarding radio frequency interference as mandated by the FCC and in accordance with the FCC's best practice. The applicant should demonstrate compliance with the county's noise control and abatement regulations in the presence of a county representative by running all equipment, including the generator, and taking sound level measurements. The Granville County Land Development Code has a noise regulation that at the property line, it cannot be more than 65 decibels. Again, this is a proposed 300-foot guide tower with Verizon being the initial tenant at the top. And you'll see the site plan illustrating compliance with setbacks from property lines and public and right-of-ways. I would like to turn over and have Cityscape, Mrs. Raybold, give her report. Yes, sir.
Instructions to the, Mr. Wren, would you please read instructions to the board? Sorry, didn't have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Federal Telecommunications Act, as codified at 47 U.S.C. Section 332C7, allows municipalities, including counties, to regulate the placement of wireless service facilities. Part 2, Article 9, Chapter 160D of the North Carolina General Statutes, wireless telecommunications facilities, sets out the statutory framework pursuant to which local governments can regulate wireless telecommunications facilities. The wireless facility and wireless support structure siting ordinance for the County of Granville is found in Article 9 of Chapter 32 of the Granville County Land Development Code. Section 32-572C requires a major special use permit for all new wireless support structures. In order to grant a special use permit to construct a new freestanding wireless support structure, the board must find that the applicant demonstrated why a site of a higher priority was not selected. In order to find that the applicant demonstrated why a site of higher priority was not selected, the applicant must have demonstrated to the satisfaction of this board the reason or reasons why such a permit should be granted for the proposed site and the hardships that would be incurred by the applicant if the permit were not granted for the proposed site. The above referenced 8 orders of priority for constructing a new wireless support structure are set out in Ordinance Section 32-572A as follows. 1. Attach concealed antenna onto an existing structure. 2. Co-located antenna on existing freestanding wireless support structures. 3. Attach non-concealed antenna onto an existing structure. 4. Freestanding wireless support structures on a site with an existing wireless support structure or tall structure. 5. Conceal freestanding wireless support structures on county-owned property. 6. Conceal freestanding wireless support structures on other property in the county. 7. Non-conceal freestanding wireless support structures on county-owned property. And 8. Non-concealed freestanding wireless support structures on other property in the county. In addition to these requirements, the ordinance also sets out specific requirements for all new wireless support structures. Section 32-573, General Requirements for Wireless Support Structures and Broadcast Facilities. A. Security of wireless support structures. All wireless support structures shall be located, fenced, or otherwise secured in a manner that prevents unauthorized access. Specifically as follows. 1. All antennas, towers, and other supporting structures, including guy wires, shall be made inaccessible to individuals and constructed or shielded in such a manner that they cannot be climbed or run into. And 2. Transmitters and telecommunications control points must be installed in a manner to be readily accessible only to persons authorized to operate or service them. B. Signage. Wireless support structures shall contain a sign no larger than 4 square feet to provide adequate notification to persons in the immediate area of the presence of an antenna that has transmission capabilities. The sign shall contain the names of the owners and operators of the facility, an emergency phone number, and FCC registration number if applicable. The sign shall be on the equipment shelter or shed of the applicant and be visible from the access point of the site and must identify the equipment shelter of the applicant. The sign shall not be lighted unless the board shall have allowed such lighting or unless applicable provisions of law require such lighting. No other signage, including advertising, shall be permitted on any wireless support structure unless required by law. C. Access. At a wireless support structure site, an access road, turnaround space, and parking shall be provided to assure adequate emergency and service access. Maximum use of existing roads, whether public or private, shall be made to the extent practicable. Road construction shall at all times minimize ground disturbance and vegetation cutting. Road grade shall closely follow natural contours to assure minimal visual disturbance and reduce soil erosion. D. Setbacks. All wireless support structures and broadcast facilities shall be set back from abutting property lines and recorded rights-of-way by the following distances. A distance equal to the height of the wireless support structure or broadcast facility tower or structure, or use breakpoint technology as provided for in Section 32-579A8A. Any accessory structure shall be located so as to comply with the applicable minimum setback requirements for the property on which it is situated. In making these findings a fact, the board's decisions must be based on competent, material, and substantial evidence in the record. Substantial evidence is more than a mere scintilla. It means such relevant evidence as a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support a conclusion. It must do more than create the suspicion of the existence of the fact to be established. The concurring vote of a majority of the members of the board shall be necessary to grant a special use permit. Vacant positions on the board and members who are disqualified from voting on an evidentiary matter shall not be considered members of the board. If for calculation of the requisite majority if there are no qualified alternates to take the place of such member. As always, a member of this board shall not participate in or vote on a special use permit in a manner that would violate affected person's constitutional rights to an impartial decision maker. Impermissible violations of due process include, but are not limited to, a member having a fixed opinion prior to hearing the matter that is not acceptable to change, undisclosed ex parte communications, a close familial, business, or other associational relationship with an affected person, or financial interest in the outcome of the matter. If an objection is raised to a member's participation and that member does not recuse himself or herself, the remaining members shall, by majority vote, rule on the objection. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Wren. And we will now hear evidence from the applicant. And notation says the case must be presented by a licensed attorney for the applicant. Witnesses must be sworn. Only relevant and competent evidence should be heard.
Mr. Chairman, may the county's consultant, Cityscape, put into the record their report and answer any questions you may have and go over their report.
Okay, is that acceptable, Attorney Wren?
It's acceptable to me. Are there any objections from any party? That's okay.
Okay. Are there any individuals who wish to present evidence against the major special use permit? Cityscape. I'm sorry.
She's going to go ahead and read.
Oh, she's going to read it into the record. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. Excuse me.
That's fine. Good evening. I'm Susan Raybold with Cityscape Consultants. I'm not going to read the whole report, but I am going to touch on the items that the attorney has brought to your attention. The first is with regards to the hierarchy that you have of citing priorities, and the applicant has demonstrated that they cannot attach onto an existing facility or co-locate on an existing facility, and that their application for a concealed or non-concealed facility not on county-owned land but on private property is justified. To justify this, Cityscape did an independent search of the existing sites or existing tower locations and tall structures within the applicant's search ring that they provided. And we actually went out and found that the closest tower is 5 miles to the south, which is considerably outside of the search ring that Verizon provided. And we also verified that the nearest county-owned property is about 4 miles west near US Highway 15 North, which is also considerably outside of their search ring. So we feel that the location is justified. Your code prefers that the height of the tower be limited to 199 feet, but in no circumstance would the tower go above 300. So we reviewed the possibility of Verizon going in at a lower height. They provided maps that demonstrated satisfactorily to our engineer that by going to a lower elevation at around 190 feet, that the estimated loss in coverage that they're trying to provide would be by 50 to 60%. And so given the rural area, the need to go at a higher elevation in order to maximize the use of that facility and not to have another facility in that same geographic area would justify the height at 300 feet. They have met the signage requirements that are in the code. We also looked at the setbacks, and the setback is at least 300 feet, which is what the height of the tower would be. With regards to the fencing and landscaping, they're proposing to use a combination of new planted material and existing planted material that's well documented in their site development pages of their construction drawings. And they're also proposing to put in green PVT slat inserts into the chain link fence to help screen the fence in addition to the landscaping, not only around the equipment compound, but also the compound with the guy wires out away from the tower. They are providing a 30-foot wide access and utility easement starting on Jones Road and going to the ground compound. They will have a gravel driveway, and there is room for parking and turnaround at the end of that access drive into the compound of the fence. And with regards to the other standards of the code, they have all been addressed. They've provided compliance statements, both of RF emissions and for interference. And so we, based on our study, we find that they have justified the site and that they have effectively met all the standards of your code.
Mr. Chairman, may I have, ask a few questions if it's,
Actually,
okay.
we need to,
Not
are there
yet.
any individuals who wish to present evidence against a major special use permit?
I think we have. I think we're still waiting on evidence on behalf of the special use permit.
Okay,
From the applicant,
From the applicant, yeah.
or from the applicant's attorney.
the applicant's attorney. Okay. Can
So-
you hold it till after?
Good evening, Board. My name is Anthony Bologna. My address is 301 Fayetteville Street, Unit 1700, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601. I'd like to ask that all exhibits and testimony today be entered into evidence, and I thank you for your time. So this is, well, first we worked closely with Barry Baker and Susan Raybold through the process of applying for the major special use permit. They did a great job, and thank you for the recitation of what we have today. So I've got a PowerPoint for you. I believe that sometimes depictions are better than descriptions, so here will be some visuals and some fast facts on the tower. So the address is 4516 Jones Road, Oxford, North Carolina, 27565. The zoning designation is agricultural residential, AR40. And the tower height here is 295 feet with a 5-foot lightning rod. This is a guide tower, and the anchor tenant is Verizon. There'll be co-location opportunities for 5 additional carriers. So Verizon will take 1 slot, and then there will be 5 additional spaces for future antennas. And the location of the subject site in the tower is in the eastern northeastern portion of the county and borders closely with Vance County. So here are propagation maps which demonstrate the pre-installation of the tower coverage and then the post-tower coverage in the area. And this is at 290 feet. And as Susan alluded to, this is the diminished coverage that we get when if we were to reduce the tower height to down to 190 feet. So just to go back, so it almost halves in size. Here are coverage plots for in-building coverage, and then these are for in-vehicle coverage. Here's our overall site plan. The fall zone radius is 300 feet, but in the instance that towers ever do fall, crisis engineering has advanced substantially in the last few decades, and towers are designed to crumble on themselves rather than to tip over. But here we have enough space and adequately meet the setbacks provided by the county's ordinance, and those are shown here. The site is also home to overhead power lines already, and so we felt that the siting of the tower here was consonant with what was already on the site. And this is an elevation drawing showing the height of the tower and the potential locations for future antenna arrays and carriers. So I'd like to invite David Brown to speak to, he's an RF engineer, I'll let him introduce himself, but to speak to the propagation maps and Verizon's coverage here.
Thank you. Can you hold 1 second, please? Need to confer with the attorney. It says after each witness, the board may inquire in opposing parties must be given the opportunity to cross-examine. I think I made a mistake with Commissioner Williford. We had a question.
Well, she wasn't really a witness. I mean, you could have certainly let Commissioner Williford speak, but she was just providing the county's report into the record. But he's certainly entitled to ask his question if you will allow him to do it.
Yes.
And I don't know for which one of you ladies or gentlemen this would be for. I'm familiar with that area. That is my district. So I know where it is. There's an airport that's not too terribly far from there as the crow flies. So I'm assuming all flight patterns, whatever it has to be done with the federal FCC has been taken care of for that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So we worked with Barry Baker during our application process and confirmed that its proximity to the airport, all of our requirements, we complied, and the tower will also be lighted in accordance with FAA requirements, and we do have an FAA determination in our application.
Okay.
Commissioner, there is an airport height ordinance in the county. Their proposed height with the ground elevation is less than the maximum that would be allowed in this particular location.
Okay. Not finished quite yet, but thank you for that one. How many acres will the entire area consume that you will negotiate with the homeowner, landowner?
So the subject site is 25.25 acres roughly, and then the leased area is a 100 by 100 foot leased area. And then there is, of course, a 30-foot access easement with a 12-foot wide gravel drive that leads to the tower from Jones Road.
And the lease agreement, are we able to ask how long is that lease agreement for?
I can check in just a moment if you'd like.
Okay. The distance, you said by going from 199 feet or from 300 feet to 199 drops at approximately 50 to 60% decrease. But what is the mileage? What is your voice? I know there's a voice and there's a data distance. What is that distance approximately at the 300 foot?
David, would you like to speak to that?
I haven't measured on this particular one the exact mileage, but it's somewhat variable, but the in-building coverage would be several miles, and then what they call in-vehicle, like could be 3 to 5 miles, and then just voice outdoor walking around can go on for 6, 7, 8 miles, and we have sites around it. It's a big place where we don't have a site,
right?
So those other sites will come in and
pick it up.
Yes.
Okay. So typically, what I was told is data is about half what the voice is, distance. Is that correct?
Voice can go pretty far, but data is more. It'll just be slower and slower the further you get away, but it can go pretty much almost the same.
Okay.
Voice has more robustness to it, but and uses very little data, so it can carry pretty far, and it has that's our highest priority, to keep the voice call up above everything else.
You sell spots on these, is what I've been told, or you'll be at the top, and then you can sell as many as 5 more up and down, give or take.
Yes, the tower company can have other lease spots to other carriers.
And that is also with internet and cell data companies? Is anything else that they sell it to be used for?
Not other than wireless communications. Like it could be the county, the state has one called Viper, and
right.
But it would probably most likely be T-Mobile and AT&T.
And they don't have to come back to be approved by us, Mr. Baker? No, sir. Okay. All right. That's my only questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions before we move on?
I'm not that familiar with this location. Is it near, is it in an isolated area? I mean, clearly isolated? If it collapses, is it potential, it's no potential of striking a roadway or residents?
That's correct. The tower is set back from all property lines further than the height of the tower. And as I mentioned, you know, especially with the way the guide towers as here, they almost go like this, where rather than tipping over, they'll sort of crumble on themselves. And so it should not pose any threat to residents or travelers on nearby roads.
So with
Jones
it
Road.
being 100 feet higher than normal, then what, just, I guess this is a question of curiosity, but I think inquiring minds want to know, wind speed, what's the tolerance?
I can take a look in our file. That should be in the application packet in the structural design report, but it should be able to withstand any storms or extreme weather events in excess of, I believe, over 100 miles an hour.
Okay, thank you.
And with respect to the height of the tower, you know, it's in such a rural area, it's almost more efficient to build one taller tower than 2 or 3 shorter towers.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'd like to invite Michael Berkowitz to speak to the impact on adjoining and adjacent property values.
Did he give that testimony he was going to give? I think his testimony was interrupted, wasn't it?
For the wind speed and everything, they do a very careful analysis, the A&E, like how much space is on the antenna, how much wind resistance, how much weight. They do a very, very detailed, you know, obviously don't ever want to have one fall, and it's very, you know, very, very rare that one will fall. I mean, I only think I've seen one in North and South Carolina and Tennessee in like 20 years that actually fell. And but I do just want to say thank you for considering. I've been meeting with Granville County EMS and public safety folks for many years, and we've been, you know, trying to put these up. And we, you know, we know there's some areas still to the north, and there's very many people who use them, and customers will have, in that green area on the map, would have access to ultra wideband like home internet. And a lot of people are working from home now, and they can use that. And a lot of agriculture is going away, and we have, you know, also I've heard that a lot of times, you know, school kids have to go to McDonald's to do their homework, not necessarily in this spot, but I have heard in the counties, and 300 and 400 foot towers are not uncommon in eastern North Carolina. We have quite a few of those. And lastly, I hear the grandkids won't visit grandmama if she doesn't have internet. I seriously have heard this, you know, and so, you know, I'm loving to build these towers, and we've tried. I've got the funding, and very happy to build those because I like to make the customers happy. Did you have any other questions for me? Or that's all I had to say.
Thank you.
I thought there was additional testimony you had that he was going to provide, and was any documentary evidence you needed to get introduced?
It was just to speak to the propagation maps, which I believe you did, and addressed questions. And that was the extent of your testimony, David, with respect to this tower?
More questions, I'm fine to answer.
Well, I just thought you said you were calling him for some information at one point.
Oh, yes, sir. I just meant to speak to the propagation maps and the cellular coverage in the area.
Okay.
Thanks for the reminder. And I'd like to call Michael Berkowitz.
Good evening. My name is Michael Berkowitz. I'm a certified general appraiser, have been for over 20 years in North and South Carolina. I was asked to perform an impact study of the proposed tower. I also looked at several towers, and in Granville County. And if you look in my report, actually, many of these towers are over 250 feet, which is not uncommon for rural areas to be able to maximize the utility of an existing tower. Also, depending upon the topography, they can get really much larger coverage with less towers. In that report, I provided examples of a quantitative and qualitative analysis of adjacent and nearby properties with visual impact from a tower. Based upon the evidence that I have provided in my report, the results of these analyses indicate that they have met the requirement as to minimize the adverse impact of the proposed tower through screening existing vegetation. There is no noise that generates. I know that they have a 65 decibel limit with the noise ordinance. I'm sure that would be a contingency and a condition of this approval. Even with the light, there were examples of guide towers that I provided in there with nearby adjacent properties with visual impact from a lit guide tower just like this, and there was no impact on value, providing no evidence from the market. Be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, is there any individuals who wish to present evidence against this special use?
Can we get your documents introduced into evidence, please? I believe they were in their agenda packet, but I don't think they've been formally submitted into the record.
Yes, sir. I'd like to request that all documents included in the application, including testimony given today on behalf of the application and the client, be admitted into evidence.
Does that meet requirements?
That's for you to rule on, unless the board has any objection.
Without objection from the board, it will be entered into evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner, would you like me to find the length of the lease, or it would take me a couple moments to pull it up?
If you can do it within a couple of minutes, yes.
Sure thing.
Okay. Do any board members, okay, I'm going to call one more time. Are there any individuals who wish to present evidence against the major special use permit? If you will, come forward at this time. I don't see any movement. So do members of the board have any questions? If no further questions from the board, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second. We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those likewise, ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Attorney, Mr. Wren, would you please summarize the evidence that has been presented to the
Susan Raybold, on behalf of Cityscape, submitted Cityscape's report indicating that the proposed application meets the requirements of the ordinance. The attorney and engineer and appraiser on behalf of the applicant also summarized their application, presented evidence that the application meets the requirements of the ordinance. That's what some of the evidence shows. What all of the evidence shows is for the board to determine.
Okay. Does anyone who's been sworn in object to the attorney's summary of the evidence? If not, I will now open the floor to board members to discuss the application as a whole before we move into discussions and voting on each required finding of fact. Does anyone have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not opposing this by any means. My concern is the height. I think we did this just as I came on the board, and when I first came on the board, we did one in the western part of the county on McFarland Road, and it was 199 feet, I believe, is what that one was. And I understand the distance, but the 300 feet concerns me. That's where my concern lay. Not opposing it, I'm just making that comment.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Wilford. And we will now move on to each required finding of fact. Mr. Wren, would you please read the first required finding of fact?
In order to grant a major special use permit to construct a new freestanding wireless support structure, the board must find that the applicant demonstrated why a site of high priority was not selected. In order to find that the applicant demonstrated why a site of higher priority was not selected, the applicant must have demonstrated to the satisfaction of this board the reason or reasons why such a permit should be granted for the proposed site and the hardships that would be incurred by the applicant if the permit were not granted for the proposed site. The above referenced 8 orders of priority for constructing a new wireless support structure are set out in Ordinance Section 32-572A as follows. 1, attached concealed antenna onto an existing structure. 2, co-located antenna on existing freestanding wireless support structures. 3, attached non-concealed antenna onto an existing structure. 4, freestanding wireless support structures on a site with an existing wireless support structure or tall structure. 5, concealed freestanding wireless support structures on county-owned property. 6, concealed freestanding wireless support structures on other property in the county. 7, non-concealed freestanding wireless support structures on county-owned property. And 8, non-concealed freestanding wireless support structures on other property in the county.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Wren. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record. Does anyone have anything to say?
Mr. Chairman, I believe in reference to that finding of fact, I'm looking at page 380, the first paragraph. Cityscape conducted an independent verification of potential sites within the Verizon provided search ring. And it goes on to talk about that. And I think in the testimony, I recall that there were possible sites, but about 5 miles away. So I do believe with that, the evidence is sufficient evidence has been submitted to support that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cozart. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the first finding of fact? If not, I will entertain a motion either for or against finding the first finding of fact. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the first finding of fact has been achieved, and I move that it be accepted.
Thank you, Commissioner Cozart. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by voting aye. Aye. All those against likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Wren, would you please read the second required finding of fact?
The board must find that all wireless support structures shall be located, fenced, or otherwise secured in a manner that prevents unauthorized access, specifically as follows. 1, all antennas, towers, and other supporting structures, including guy wires, shall be made inaccessible to individuals and constructed or shielded in such a manner that they cannot be climbed or run into. And 2, transmitters and telecommunications control points must be installed in a manner to be readily accessible only to persons authorized to operate or service them.
Okay, you've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Mr. Chair, page 384, under fencing and landscaping, I believe meets the standard.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the second finding of fact? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion either for or against finding the second finding of fact.
Make a motion for.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second in 2 places. So is there any further discussion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Attorney, would you read the third required finding of fact?
The board must find that the wireless support structure shall contain a sign no larger than 4 feet square to provide adequate notification to persons in the immediate area of the presence of an antenna that has transmission capabilities. The sign shall contain the names of the owners and operators of the facility, an emergency phone number, and FCC registration number if applicable. The sign shall be on the equipment shelter or shed of the applicant and be visible from the access point of the site. It must identify the equipment shelter of the applicant. The sign shall not be lighted unless the board shall have allowed such lighting or unless the applicable provisions of law require such lighting. No other signage, including advertising, shall be permitted on any wireless support structure unless required by law.
Thank you, Mr. Wren. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair, I was unable to find signage within here. If another commissioner has, it would be helpful. Or, Mr. Chair, maybe the county attorney can have the
If I may, this was reviewed in Susan Raybould, the county's consultant's review of the application and found to be sufficient. In the zoning and construction drawings, there are visuals of the signage details included therein that include warnage signage, FCC registration signage, and tower owner signage as well.
It's noted on page 478 of the agenda. I believe it says compliance signage will be posted as detailed on sheet C11 of the drawings provided in Exhibit F, and I'll have to locate Exhibit F, but is that in the agenda packet?
And what page is that, 478?
That was where that was mentioned. I'm looking for Exhibit F now. That's in the, supposedly in here somewhere.
Second item.
Yes. Yeah, I see it there.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to address that now.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now, commissioners have found it. We're good. Okay. Is there any other discussion on the evidence supporting the third finding of fact? If not, we'll entertain a motion either for or against finding that the third finding of fact.
I make a motion based on Exhibit F, page 478, under section 32.573, subsection B, reference signage.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Cozart. All those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please read the fourth required finding of fact?
The board must find that the wireless support structure site as proposed will have an access road, turnaround space, and parking sufficient to assure adequate emergency and service access. Maximum use of existing roads, whether public or private, shall be made to the extent practicable. Road construction shall at all times minimize ground disturbance and vegetation cutting. Road grades shall closely follow natural contours to assure minimal visual disturbance and reduce soil erosion.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and you've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Mr. Chairman. Go ahead, Commissioner J. Mr. Chairman, our fact finding on page 383 of what says site access and parking.
Thank you, Commissioner Jay. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the fourth finding of fact? Being no other discussion, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please read the fifth required finding of fact?
The board must find that the proposed wireless support structure shall be set back from abutting property lines and recorded rights-of-way by the following distances: a distance equal to the height of the wireless support structure, broadcast facility, tower, or structure, or use breakpoint technology as provided for in subsection 32-579-8A. Any accessory structure shall be located so as to comply with the applicable minimum setback requirements for the property on which it is situated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wren. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there's competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I believe on page 384 under setbacks, that is set forth in the proposal.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the fifth finding of fact? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion either for or against the finding of the fifth finding of fact.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the evidence of the fifth finding of fact.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin, for the motion, and thank you, Commissioner Jay, for the second. And we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, likewise. The ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. The board has voted in support of each required finding of fact. Is there anything else to discuss as it relates to this application for major special use permit? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the major special use permit.
For the accuracy of the record and to answer the two questions that were asked, the lease for the subject site in the tower is in the form of an easement and shall be for 99 years commencing on the date that grantee begins commercial operation of the improvements, i.e. the tower and related appurtenances. And then the basic wind speed that the tower will tolerate is 113 miles per hour with no ice and 30 miles per hour with 1.5 inches of ice, and will be designed to ANSI TIA building code requirements adopted in North Carolina.
And I just wanted to clarify that I believe I mentioned page 478 earlier. It looks like that page was actually referring to the second application, but the signage issue, I believe, was addressed in Mrs. Raybow's report and also on the drawing submitted with the first application as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, sorry, so I just gave the wrong page number.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Wren. Okay. Now getting back to our script here, the board has voted in support of each required finding of fact. Is there anything else to discuss as it relates to this application for major special use permit? Does anyone have anything else to discuss? Good. Well, I will entertain a motion to approve or deny this major special use permit.
Make a motion, we approve.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner May.
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Jay. Is there any questions on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll go into evidentiary hearing regarding the Lucy Averette Road Major Special Use Permit application for proposed wireless telecommunications tower, and this is on page 455 of our agenda. And the next matter is the evidentiary hearing to rule on the application for a major special use permit by TowerCom 4-B LLC for the location of a wireless telecommunications facility with a fenced equipment compound on property owned by Alan Daniel Jr. and Carol Daniel, located off of Lucy Averette Road and Enon Road in Granville County, North Carolina. And now entertain a motion to open the hearing.
Move to open the hearing, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to open the hearing by Commissioner Jay.
Second the motion, Mr.
We
Chairman.
have a second by Commissioner Cozart. All those in favor of opening the hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Any opposition? Don't hear any opposition. Motion carries, and we are now in our open hearing. Both proponents and opponents of the permit will be given an opportunity to present evidence and arguments. At this time, all those wishing to speak or present evidence for or against the proposed major special use permit, please come forward and be sworn in now. Only those individuals who are sworn in will be allowed to address the board. So if you believe there's any chance you may want to present evidence on this case, please come forward at this time.
Okay, please state your name for the record again. Okay, and behind you? Okay. Next. Oh, Mr. Baker, can you turn that mic on, please? If you don't mind, can you state your name again?
Alan Thomas Daniel Jr.
Okay.
David Brown, Verizon Manager.
Robin Clement, TowerCom.
George Davis, TowerCom.
Susan Raybold, Cityscape Consultants.
Anthony Bologna, attorney on behalf of TowerCom.
Michael Berkowitz, MPB Real Estate.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence and information you shall give to the Granville County Board of Commissioners shall bear relevance to and be pertinent to the issue before the Granville County Board of Commissioners?
I do.
And now, Mr. Baker, will you give us a preliminary statement of the case?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. This is a proposal for a wireless telecommunication tower, major special use permit to construct a 199-foot monopole wireless telecommunication tower with a fence compound on property owned by Alan Daniel Jr. and Carol Daniel. The property has frontage both on Lucy Averette Road and Enon Road, with its proposed driveway on Lucy Averette Road. Property is zoned AR 40, Agricultural Residential 40. Mrs. Raybold is here tonight to present the Cityscape consultant report. Cityscape is the county's telecommunication consultant. They provided conditions or recommended conditions, and the applicant has voluntarily accepted in writing, and it is in the file. At the county's discretion, the tower, antennas, and all other ancillary equipment mounted on the tower shall be painted a color deemed the least visually obtrusive. Generally, that is non-reflective gray. All unused cable ports on the tower shall be sealed to prevent wildlife intrusion. if a valid complaint of interference to an authorized county or municipal public safety radio facility is found to be associated with Verizon, and Verizon is would be the first tenant and it would be at the top of the tower. Verizon's installation at the proposed facility, that the applicant shall comply with all applicable rules regarding radio frequency interference as mandated by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, and in accordance with the FCC's best practice guidelines. It is a 199-foot monopole tower. It would not require, under FAA regulations, a blinking light. It is illustrated, the site plan illustrates that there's a full fall radius from the right-of-ways and property lines. I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has. And Mrs. Raybold is here to present the cityscape report. So I turn it over to her.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Baker. Next, we want Mr. Wren to please read the instructions to the board. Okay.
I can solve this and make it easy if it's all right with the chair. So unless
please
anyone
do.
objects, I've read the instructions last time. If anyone needs me to read them again, I'm happy to, but I think everyone in the audience heard them as well.
Thanks.
So you don't have to worry about what order I go in.
Hey, it's on the script. I had to read it. Sorry. Mr. Baker, will you please continue? Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption.
That's fine. Mrs. Raybold, I would ask for you to make your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, Susan Raybold with Cityscape Consultants, and we reviewed this application for the proposed monopole, and the height is 199 feet, and the applicant has demonstrated that there are no existing facilities within their search area on which to attach to, co-locate on, and there is also no existing towers that they could go on property that are existing either within that search area. And there is not any county property within that area either. We did an independent search on our own in addition to what the applicant provided. The nearest known communication tower that we found is at 1.88 miles southeast of the applicant's proposed site, which is outside that search area. And the closest public property, county-owned property, is 2.88 miles outside of the search. So, or excuse me, 2.88 miles from the proposed site, also outside of the search ring. I'm going to defer to the specifics on the signage to the applicant, but we did look at the signage when we reviewed the application, and they meet your standards as required by your code. The setbacks are that if the applicant is not using breakpoint technology, then it is a 1-to-1 foot setback for the height of the tower. So they're required to be 199 feet from the property lines. All of the property lines are, or the setback is in excess of 200 feet from all property lines, so they're well within the setback requirements. They are proposing fencing and landscaping. They're proposing a chain link fence around the compound 8 feet in height, topped with 3 strands of barbed wire angled outward to prevent climbing, thereby meeting the ordinance requirements for keeping people from getting into the compound. The landscape plan that they're proposing is with using existing tree preservation. The applicant amended the site plan multiple times to make sure that the landscaping provisions for tree preservation are addressed, and Cityscape is satisfied that they are meeting your code requirements for that. With regards to the site access and parking, they are showing a 30-foot wide access easement from Lucy Averette Road, and that access easement goes down into the compound via gravel. And then there's a 30 by 60 foot parking and turnaround area so that the site has plenty of parking and turnaround area for emergency vehicles that may need to get to the site, or to applicants in the future, or co-locations in the future that are going to be on that tower. With regards to the other standards in the code, they have addressed all of the requirements with regards to the RF statements, with regards to the visual photo simulations, and RF compliance. So we made the determination that they have met your code and would be subject to approval if that's what you deem to do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Karen had to straighten me out, sorry. We will now hear evidence from the applicant.
Good evening, Board. Would you like me to reintroduce myself? All right. Well, once again, just want to acknowledge that Barry and Susan, who worked closely with them through the application process, and as well as the other engineering firm that helped out. But you guys did a great job, and we appreciate your help. Cityscape has determined that the application is complete and the tower is technically justified. We have our property owner here. We have folks from TowerCom, and we have Michael Berkowitz here as well as Mr. Brown, who spoke previously. So just to soup to nuts presentation like last time. I'm Anthony here on behalf of TowerCom. The address for this site is on Lucy Avid Road, and it's in Oxford, North Carolina. It's in the agricultural residential zoning designation AR40. However, the height of this tower is 195 feet, with the 4-foot lightning rod bringing it to 199 feet total. This is a monopole tower, so there are no guy anchors like last time. Verizon is the anchor tenant, and there will be co-location slots for 5 additional carriers. And then the location of this in the overall county is right in the middle. So here are some pre and post propagation maps that show coverage currently without the tower and coverage following the tower's installation and construction. Here's the overall site plan with the property corners, and shows the general vicinity of the site. Here's the site plan in more specificity. Here's an overall plan. And here's the elevation of the tower, again showing the height and the opportunity for additional co-locations. A couple points that I wanted to make about the site. The site is currently wooded and home to existing landscaping, which will provide buffering from view from Lucy Avid Road and Enon Road. Additionally, there are overhead power lines that run across the site. So again, this use and construction of the tower should be consonant with what is already on the site. Going back to the vegetation, that vegetation is intended to be retained, and I'm happy to answer any questions, should you guys have any.
Does anyone have any questions?
And I'd like to, one last point, we've received support from neighboring property owners in each cardinal direction from the subject site, voicing their approval and excitement about the construction of the tower.
Okay. Do you have anything you wish to have entered into the record as evidence at this time, or?
I'd like all of the.
Wait till later.
Pardon me?
Do you want to enter now, or you want to wait till later?
We can enter it now. I'd like all testimony given today and application materials presented to Cityscape in the county and relied upon today to be submitted into evidence and relied upon.
Thank you. Mr. Red, is that acceptable?
I think that as far as the documentary evidence, it's certainly fine. The testimony will come in when it comes in, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
David, do you have a moment to speak?
Yeah, it's just another good site. We have sites all around. It's a big hole. I don't like to say that, but it's a big coverage hole. And, you know, it probably could be a little higher, but I know we go under 200 feet, so we don't have to light. It doesn't have to be lighted and doesn't have to go with the FAA. So that, you know, probably why they decided they could go a little under 200. I didn't talk to the RF engineer directly, but it's another great site for a big area that really needs the coverage. I don't know if you have any questions about it. The height, you mentioned that we were talking about that one earlier. Each doubling of the height actually doubles the coverage area. That's the physics. So when that other site was going from 2 to 300, that's half. You know, if it had gone to 400, that would be double the coverage area. But it is very important. And people who co-locate under you, you know, of course, they're going down in height. So, you know, we want to be on top. We want to get the best coverage. But if it gets down, you know, the trees, when the RF has to go through trees, it gets very much attenuated. And a site under 100 feet is almost nothing. And then we get 150, you can start getting a little ways. 200 is decent, pretty good. And the sites are a little closer than that one in northeast of Oxford. So this will be a very good site. That's, you know, I'm really happy to give. And you know what? Sometimes we do have to compromise. We have to lower them. The next thing, like, I'll be getting complaints. You know, there's those little areas that got pulled out. And to be honest, I wouldn't even be surprised if we had to pull that one in Northeast down. Those people in the airport said, we have it pretty good. You know, I get right up to the airport, but when we go into the building, I don't have coverage. And then someone's telling me we have to get coverage in there. And so we're trying to look at other solutions then. Do you have fiber there? We can put an e-femto inside the building to help people because they got right there, but they couldn't. Now I'm dropping a call right when I walk inside, and it's important. And so every little bit of extra coverage from the height, it really does matter. And I, you know, deal with this thousands of times.
Mr. Chairman, given the fact you mentioned that was a big hole where you're on the Lucy Avid area, and I'm familiar with that area, not in my district, but I know it well. What determines why this area needs to be the 300 foot and this one is the 199? Just
now they're
as
a little
Commissioner
further.
May says, curious minds want to know.
We call it like building the cell sites on a grid. Like you look at a grid and you try to fill in. The sites on that area up there northeast are a little further apart from it, like 6 or 8 miles apart. So it's just more area. When I looked at the maps on this one, I thought, you know, this one could have been a little higher. It wouldn't have needed to be 300 because if you go too high, it will start going too far. It would like go into Oxford where we have sites. It's just it's a little smaller hole. It's still very much a hole, that Highway 158, and I have gotten complaints on that. And there's 2 sites on that next highway up to the north, and they don't really connect. You go through, you can drop a call, and I've gotten complaints on both those areas, but it's enough to, you know, fill in that hole, which is not quite as big as that one. If you go up further north, bigger holes, I would want, you know, as the engineer, I want 400 feet up there, but, you know, so it's just, you get closer in, the sites are a little denser. We have Oxford, 85, we have sites around there. They're just not as spread as far apart as that one up there.
Commissioner Jay and myself have the majority of the northern district of Granville County. It goes all the way to the Virginia border. And there are a lot of people, and I think I'm saying this accurately, that don't have cell phone service, that we know personally that still carry a landline. And I don't want to get off topic, but what determines when do you guys start saying, okay, here's the area we need, here's where we need another cell phone tower, and this could be true in the southern end of the county. Doesn't matter where it is, okay? Doesn't matter. What triggers that to start looking for another spot?
Well, in that case up there in northern Granville County, I had meetings with your public safety people, and they told me exact addresses, like here's this lady we have to go to, and we don't have coverage. So that's kind of in my mind, the highest priority is the public safety. But then there's a lot of inputs we get, and it can be regular people like the inspectors, like people who are doing inspectors and the police and customers, and it can be a lot of external sources. It can be like, when I mentioned those things earlier about McDonald's, that was Robeson County. Brendan Jones, the representative, was actually asking us about those, and actually we had a meeting with him. But and also we look at our network, like from the engineering side, how are those sites performing? Because we can see, the ones up north up there will have higher dropped calls and things like that, and they also become more loaded because although there's not that many people up there, they cover further because the sites are so far apart. So it strains the site more when the people are farther away, because as you more power to get there, more power to get back, and that's when the data slows down. And it could be anything. It could be somebody really important lives up there. It's a VIP, and they complained. It could be a representative. It could be a lot of different things. But and then they will give us so many, millions of dollars to build sites, and they say, rank your most important ones on a lot of different criteria, like the rural areas, how competitive are we with competitors? All these things will come into it, and we might have a site totally, like these ranked up pretty high. I mean, we don't get unlimited, and so we will basically go where the need is the greatest until we run out of money. I hope that wasn't too much explanation. We're building like crazy now, I'll tell you that.
I'd like to call Mr. George Davis with TowerCom, who has a couple points to make.
Good evening, Board. George Davis, 5001 Winding V Lane, Raleigh, North Carolina. I know it's been a long meeting, and I appreciate all the good work that you guys are doing here. So I just wanted to make a couple quick points that I think hearing the last presentation might answer a couple of your questions in advance, so everyone can understand and be settled in their minds about this application. Companies like your previous applicant and TowerCom, we build share use infrastructure. The idea is that we want to build it the right way in the right location to maximize tenancy on the same tower, so you don't have an unnecessary proliferation towers in your community. You have beautiful land up here. We don't want to do anything to spoil that for the residents and the people that come here to travel and work and play. So as stated already, this tower, per the Verizon engineer, should have and could have been higher. Originally, it was given to us as a request of 250 feet. We've been doing this a long time, and as stated, one of the things that we try to do is take theory of what works best and blend that with what's on the ground. And in this case, we wanted to try to bring the height of that down, and so we were able to find a nice high piece of ground. As you know, anyone that travels along Enon and Lucy Avid Road, there's a lot of topography there. So from one side of the ring to the other, there was a big change in elevation. So we were able to get a nice spot with our property owners here tonight that allowed us to bring the tower height down because the ground elevation came up. So that sort of addresses that part of it. Therefore, we don't have to light it and can go with a monopole style tower, which are effective up to about 200 feet. The site is designed to the same standards as the previous tower, which is set by EITA 222 revision H. That's 113 miles per hour with 3-second gust, or a 30 miles per hour with 1.5 inches of ice. Our plan is to purchase the property of an option to purchase, where we want to leave it intact except for the small area that we're going to impact. As staff noted, we are going to utilize existing vegetation. It had been clear cut at one point, and I think the vegetation is at average about a 20 feet height now. So that'll do better than any landscaping we could put in, but any areas we disturbed will be restored and landscaping will be supplemented in. The signs are in C11 and comply with your code. This is our second tower in the county. The other one is about to add T-Mobile to it. So again, our goal is to improve, consumer experience, improve public safety by building sites in the right place, the right way to get additional carriers to come into your communities and give people options and improve their quality of life, offering internet service, improve public safety, and access to the latest technologies that are around. Again, we had a community meeting here in this building on 12/10. Some of the neighbors that were on immediate either side as well as across the street, and then our neighbor, our property owner's sister, who also owns property on the other side of Enon as well as directly across the street from the site, all were happy to hear about the tower, had no objections, no real concerns other than they just wanted to keep with this design, and also did not want us to clear cut the lot, which we don't plan on it. And again, the siting of this site allowed it to be at this height, and we wanted to do that voluntarily to try to mitigate what Verizon asked us to do, and what we felt was the right thing to do in your community. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll yield my time. We also have Michael Berkowitz here. If there's any questions about the property impact study, he's happy to speak about it, but it's all in the record, and if you'd like to hear from him, he's happy to come up here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
I just have a question. I want to clarify where, and I'm a little unsure, where does Lucy Avid Road intersect Enon Road at?
It's just south of the church where Enon curves towards Oxford going to the northeast. There's a power line running there. Just north of that power line is the church. There's one little white house on the corner owned by the Hesters.
Okay, I've got it. Thank you.
Got it. And then so the property, the open field to the south as well as the one to the east is our property owner's sister who's here. And then the property to the west and across the street is owned by the Thompsons, and they indicated that their daughter is going to build across the street. And again, they didn't propose any objections at the time we met with them for the community meeting that was required by staff. Anything else?
Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. You have anyone else wish to speak? If that's all, if you've concluded your presentation, your portion, is there any individuals who wish to present evidence against the major special use permit? If so, come forward at this time. Seeing none, hearing none, do members of the board have any questions? If there are no further questions from the board, I'll entertain the motion to close the hearing.
Make a motion, we close the hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. We have closed the hearing. Now, let's get down to the fun part. Mr. Wren, would you please summarize the evidence that has been presented to the board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You heard from the county's consultant, Susan Raybould of Cityscape, and also the applicant's attorneys and engineers, that the application meets the requirements of the ordinance. No information has been presented to the contrary. That's what some of the evidence shows. What all of the evidence shows is for the board to determine.
Thank you. Does anyone who's been sworn in object to the attorney's summary of the evidence? I don't see anybody rising to speak. And I will now open the floor to board members to discuss the application as a whole before we move into discussions and vote on each required finding of fact. Does anyone have anything they'd like to discuss?
I think Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I'd just like to say that I feel like that they have presented the information honestly, fairly, and accurately.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilford. Does anyone else have anything to say? If not, we'll now move on to each required finding of fact. Mr. Wren, would you please read the first required finding of fact?
If it'll please the board, I'll summarize that required finding of fact since I read it in the record the first time. Does anyone have any objection if I just do that? So this is a required finding of fact that requires that the board consider the orders of priority, and that in order to grant the special use permit, there has to be no other order of priority that would work in this case. So you've heard this is this would be a non-concealed freestanding wireless support structure on other property in the county.
Thank you, Mr. Wren. And board, you've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there's competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Mr. Chair.
No, please, go ahead. I don't have anything. I'm just going to go for some notes I have.
I think we'll go with page 536, the top, and provide the ring, the process aimed at access availability existing structure suitable co-location over 100 feet. That paragraph there, I think, meets the requirement.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the first finding of fact? If not, we'll entertain a motion either for or against finding the first finding of fact.
I make a motion for finding of fact.
We have a motion for. Do I hear a second?
Second motion, Mr. Chairman.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please summarize or read the second finding of fact?
The board must find that all wireless support structures shall be located, fenced, or otherwise secured in a manner that prevents unauthorized access. Specifically as follows: all antennas, towers, and other supporting structures, including guy wires, shall be made inaccessible to individuals and constructed or shielded in such a manner that they cannot be climbed or run into, and transmitters and telecommunications control points must be installed in a manner to be readily accessible only to persons authorized to operate or service them.
Okay, you've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there's competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record. Yes.
I believe page 539, fencing and landscaping, proposed chain link fence surrounding the compound will be 8 feet in height and topped with 3 strands of barbed wire angled outward to serve as a climbing deterrent.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Wilford. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the second finding of fact? If not, I'll entertain a motion either for or against finding the second finding of fact.
Move that we accept the motion for the finding of the facts.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second motion.
We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please read the third required finding of fact? And if you want to paraphrase or cut this short, that's up to you.
I'll try that if no one objects. This is the one that says that the board must find the wireless support structure shall contain a sign no larger than 4 feet square, and notify people of the material you see set out in information there that before you and that we read previously in the record.
Thank you. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, page 478, section 32-573, Exhibit F, subparagraph B, signage. I find that statement of fact within that paragraph.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the third finding of fact? If not, we'll entertain a motion either for or against finding of the third finding of fact.
Make a motion finding of fact as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please read or summarize the fourth required finding of fact?
I don't think I can make that one much shorter. The board must find that the wireless support structure site as proposed will have an access road, turnaround space, and parking sufficient to assure adequate emergency and service access. Maximum use of existing roads, whether public or private, shall be made to the extent practicable. Road construction shall at all times minimize ground disturbance and vegetation cutting. Road grade shall follow natural contours.
Thank you, Attorney Wren. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding? If so, please identify that specific evidence for the record.
I do, Mr. Chair. Page 539, site access and parking. That paragraph there meets finding of fact.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the fourth finding of fact? If not, we'll entertain a motion either for or against finding the fourth finding of fact.
I make a motion finding of fact based on information provided.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. We have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Wren, would you please read the fifth required finding of fact?
The board must find that the proposed wireless support structure shall be set back from abutting property lines and recorded rights of way by the following distances: a distance equal to the height of the wireless support structure of the broadcast facility tower or structure, or use breakpoint technology as provided in subsection 32-579A 8A. Any accessory structure shall be located so as to comply with the applicable minimum setback requirements for the property on which it is situated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wren. You've heard the required finding of fact. Does the board believe there is competent and substantial evidence to support that finding?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I believe on page 539, that is listed under setbacks on that particular page.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Is there any other discussion as to evidence supporting the fifth finding of fact? If not, we'll go to the vote. Well, I'll entertain a motion either for or against finding the fifth finding of fact.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the information shared by Commissioner Griffin be accepted as information to meet the fifth finding of fact.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. The board has voted in support of each required finding of fact. Is there anything else to discuss as it relates to this application for major special use permit? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the major special use permit.
Mr. Chairman, I offer motion that we approve the permit for as given, as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner J. Do I hear a second?
Second motion.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you.
On behalf of TowerCo and TowerCom, thank you for your time tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Before we move on to appointments, does anyone want to take a break? I'd like for someone to make a motion to take a short 5-minute break. Please.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor of taking a 5-minute break signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, ayes have it. Motion carries. We're going to take a 5-minute break here.
Move to reappoint Mr. Sandy Gable for District 1.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? We'll go to the vote, and all those in favor of reappointing Sandy Gable for District 1, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? February 2025.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the Granville County Agricultural Advisory Board has notified me that they have a person they'd like to nominate by the name of Keith Harvey.
Okay. All right. And you want to make a motion to appoint Keith?
So I make a motion to nominate Keith Harvey to the Granville County Agricultural Board.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
We have a second from Commissioner Williford. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Now, we get to the Environmental Affairs Committee to make appointments and reappointments to the Granville County Citizens Advisory Committee for Environmental Affairs. The board shall have the power to investigate, publicize, and report to the Board of Commissioners any activities in Granville County involving threat to any land, water, or air resources which are found by the board to endanger or threaten to endanger the persons, the property of citizens of the county. The board shall serve as the eyes and ears of the Board of Commissioners on any environmental issues. The District 4 seat is vacant with unexpired term expiring January 2027. The District 7 seat is vacant with an unfilled term expiring January 2027. District 4, do you have?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm getting close. I hope to have a name at the next meeting if I can hold it.
Thank you. And for District 7, I don't have anyone as yet due to the passing of Mr. Mike Wood. We're still dealing with that loss, and my condolences, my sincere, his family.
Did we mention Mr. Wood in the last meeting, Commissioner Gooch?
I don't believe we did.
We didn't.
No.
May I? Mr.
Yes,
Gooch?
please.
Mr. Wood was a good friend of mine. I think many of the members know him on the board. He was an outstanding asset to the county, a gentleman, a Christian man, and a real loss, a tragedy, what occurred, sudden health crisis that quickly evolved and unfortunately taking his life. Leaves behind a wife and many children and grandchildren. He's a former 82nd Airborne paratrooper and was involved deeply with the South Granville Athletic Association years ago, and just a fine man. So missed by many, I'm sure. So at some point, Commissioner Gooch, I'd like for us to put together a proclamation in regards to Mr. Wood and maybe have a time in a few months to present it to his wife at one of our meetings.
That's a wonderful idea.
Just like to echo Commissioner May, Mike was a great leader. He was our chair for a while and led us through that crisis with the water and other stuff going on and through the heated times. But he was a warrior and a go-getter, and we missed him off the board.
By the way, he exposed some of the issues concerning algae scrubbers that came up, and he got ahead of that. And just be aware that's coming back up with in Durham County. They are looking at that and examining properties in Durham County for an algae scrubber and placement or the best place for them to place that. But that is not going on in Granville County. This board never can. I don't think it actually made it to the board for us to discuss. So thank you.
Yes, and I really miss Mike. He was a great man. I felt a great friend, and truly miss him. And when given time to mourn his death, we'll make some type of presentation, some plaque for his family, thanking them for all the service he did for Granville County, and he's greatly missed. Our next item of business is the Granville Health System Board of Trustees, and the purpose of the Board of Trustees shall be to determine hospital policies in relation to community needs, to see that proper professional standards are maintained, to coordinate professional interest of the hospital with administrative, financial, and community needs, to direct the chief executive officer of the hospital in carrying out policies to provide adequate financing and control of expenditures. The term of James Lumpkins, District 2, expired in December 2024. Rob, do you have a?
Yes, sir. I would like to reappoint James Lumpkins to that seat again, please.
Okay, we have a motion to reappoint Mr. Lumpkins. Is there a second? There's a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. The term of James Cyril Blaine, District 4, appointed by District 3, expired in December 2024. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move to reappoint Mr. Blaine. Is it for, I think, well,
Not your seat to appoint.
just what I think happened, at some point in redistricting, he's now living, he's living across on Canada Mill Road down below the bridge on Canada Mill on the left. And I think he ended up getting moved into my district after the realignment of districts. But if I'm in error, then I withdraw that. I think he's in District 4 now.
That would give you 3 people in District 4 on the board.
Yeah, Dawn Marie.
And it was appointed by District 3.
Oh, okay. I withdraw my motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
If Commissioner Griffin would allow, I'd like to make the motion that Commissioner Gooch take that District 3 and as a voting member, and Commissioner Griffin come on the board as an ex officio, if that's acceptable to Mr. Griffin, because it is his seat.
It is acceptable to me, thank you.
I'll second. I doubt he can make the second, so I will second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion on the motion?
It is.
I believe Mr. Gooch is going to need to resign at some point. I think that need to be need to be a two-step process because Mr. Gooch is going to need to resign from that ex officio seat in order for it to be vacant.
So
In 2000, Tony, did you have to resign from your seat as ex officio to be made a voting member? I didn't see it. We pulled the minutes from the Granville County Commissioners meeting, and I did not see that as part of the motion. In 2000, when Commissioner Cozart was the ex officio and he was moved into the voting, I did not see
When
that
in
as part of
2000?
it. Pardon me?
When in 2000, you said?
October, November of 2000, we have a copy of the minutes from that meeting if you'd like to review it.
It's like, you're currently filling a seat now, correct? You're the ex officio seat?
Yes. And it was the ex officio seat that
For the Board of
Commissioner
Commissioners.
Cozart occupied.
So may I make a suggestion? Go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
If Mr. Gooch resigned that seat tonight, then we could go ahead with the appointment of him taking over District 3 and Mr. Griffin then filling that seat, correct?
Or if you just make two subsequent motions, I think you can appoint him to the voting position, Mr. Gooch to the voting position, and once he becomes a voting member, then the ex officio seat will be vacant. Just do it in two separate motions, please.
Okay, we'll do that.
So I'll make the I'll reset the motion with Mr. Griffin's approval that Mr. Gooch become a voting member for District 3.
He just needs to be a voting member.
Okay.
He doesn't need to resign. So you're just appointing him as a voting member. He'll be from his own district at that point.
Got it.
Okay.
I'm just going to make a motion that we appoint Mr. Gooch to the board as a voting member.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, since this involves me, I'm gonna have to turn this over to Commissioner Jay.
It's been motion and proper second that Mr. Gooch would
take on a voting seat.
Would take on a voting seat on the Board of Trustees. Y'all heard the motion. Are you ready for a question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nay have the same right. Stand approved. Thank you.
My second motion, based on a follow-up, would be that Mr. Griffin now is appointed to a ex officio position.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I will second that as well.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, the next order of business, the term of Bobby Wheeler expired in December 2024. And it doesn't say which district Bobby was appointed by because Bobby is the pharmacist. District 5. Okay. All right, District 5.
I make a motion that Mayor Wheeler is reappointed to the board.
We have a motion and a second to reappoint Mayor Wheeler. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, we've completed that. And now we have the Library Board of Trustees. And the function and duties of the Board of Trustees of the Granville County Library System are those as set forth in the general statutes of the state of North Carolina. They include, but are not limited to, the appointment of a director of libraries, the adoption of policies, rules, and regulations for the governance of the library in the best interest of the citizens of the community, the authorization of sound fiscal policies, and the adoption and amendments as needed of the annual budget. As citizens, they advise the library administration on services to fulfill the library needs of the community, represent the library to the community and advance support of the library among funding authorities. The District 5 seat is vacant with the unfilled term expiring in January 2026.
Mr. Chair, I still have not found a replacement. We'll be looking for a replacement and should have one, hopefully, for our next board meeting.
The District 6 seat is vacant. And
Mr. Chairman, I would like to fill that seat with a person from District 3, Ms. Juanita Hinman,
okay.
formerly known as Sue.
Do I hear a second? Second. We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. The District 7 seat is vacant. And the District 3 seat is currently filled with an appointee from District 7. I want to offer Commissioner Griffin the opportunity to fill the District 3 seat if he wants to, and we'll transfer the appointee that's already from District 7 to District 7, which is okay, Karen Alley.
Mr. Chairman,
If that's up to you, Mr. Griffin.
at this time, I'd like to hold my appointment to our next board meeting, if that would be all right.
That will be fine.
Thank you.
And I would like to move that Karen Alley be transferred from District 3 to the District 7 appointee to open up for Commissioner Griffin. And
I make a motion that occurs as Mr. Gooch stated.
I'll second Commissioner Mays.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. All right. Now, the Orange Street Community Center. All right. I done flipped the page the wrong way somewhere or another. Here we go. Thank you, Karen. All right. To give some background, to operate the Orange Street Community Center to the terms and conditions of the lease agreement between the Board of Commissioners as lessor and the Board of Trustees as lessee, to the end that faculties of the facilities of the Orange Street Community Center will be open to the public for recreational, educational, and other purposes. The terms of all seats expire December 2024. The Executive Board of the Orange Street Community Center recommends that seats be staggered as follows, with 1 year, 2 year terms transition to a 3 year renewable cycle thereafter. Additionally, it is recommended that all currently filled seats be reappointed to align with the new structure and staggered term schedule. Commissioner Jay, do you have some comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, offer motion that we accepted the staggered terms on, and we're not, now see we have some vacancies, but we're not replacing the vacancy until our county manager and chairman and commissioner Cozart and I gather with some talking with the Orange Street Community Center.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. And now the Tourism Development Authority. right, the Granville County Board of Commissioners establishes a Tourism Development Authority as a public authority to guide the expenditure of occupancy tax funds and to promote the use and development of county recreational, historic, and tourism resources. The authority shall report quarterly and at the close of each fiscal year to the Granville County Board of Commissioners on its receipts and expenditures for the preceding quarter and for the year in such detail as the board may require. The term of Cynthia Ratliff expired October 2024. Okay. The Granville County Chamber of Commerce recommends the reappointment of Cynthia Ratliff to a 3-year term set to expire October 2027. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion, we reappoint.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second in 2 places. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No opposition. Motion carries unanimously. And now we had a Veterans Affairs Committee. And the purpose of the Granville County Veterans Affairs Committee is to advise the Granville County Veterans Service Officer on issues concerning veterans and their families and make recommendations to the county manager and the Board of Commissioners on how the county can better serve our veterans. The District 1 seat expires in February. District 1, Larry Hester was the appointee. Commissioner Jay, do you have any recommendation?
Move to reappoint Mr. Larry Hester.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. And the District 7 seat expires in February, and that is held by Gerald Siebert from District 7. Does anyone have a recommendation? I know it's my district, but.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
I was approached by someone from my district about an opening if it ever came up. And the gentleman from my district, I've known him all my life, Ronnie Boyd, and he's active, and he's a good guy. So the gentleman that is interested is Brad Oldenburg, and Brad had asked me if we ever had an opening in that, would we consider him? And I said absolutely. Now, Brad is in District 2 as well, and I don't know Mr. Siebert, but I think Brad would be a good member. But again, he's not in that district.
Are you,
Might I point out that we have one at-large seat expires in February.
Okay,
and
well.
I believe, is that vacant? We have a vacant at-large.
Okay, well, then we can hold that back then if.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I know that the BSO is going to be speaking to all commissioners about some board appointees.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that Mr. Oldenburg could not, but I think in fairness to Mr. Spies, that it would be good if he is going to be out for a few weeks, if I'm correct.
I think this current week through the coming weekend, he's out
Yeah,
of town.
and he has been requested by me that when concerning these board seats, they just redid their bylaws, that all these board selections are commissioner appointments, and that he needs to be speaking to commissioners upon if he has replacements that he has gone out and solicited to work through the commissioners. So what I'd ask you to do is just wait till he gets back and have a conversation with him. Although I think Mr. Oldenburg would be an outstanding selection.
and it was a year and a half ago when Brad mentioned it. He may have changed his mind, but I told him I would certainly look into it. If it ever came open, I would remember it. So I'd like to go back and circle around back to him, and also with Mr. Spears.
Yes, sir. And then we made it very clear in the bylaws that these appointments are commissioner appointments.
Okay.
Commissioner May, we have District 7 seat expires in February. The spouse of a veteran seat expires in February. The female veteran seat expires in February. One at-large seat expires in February. And the Moses S. Cash American Legion Post 161 in Creedmoor representative seat is vacant. Do you want to move to table all of these?
No, I don't. I have 2 nominations to make tonight to fill 2 of these. And then the others, I know that Mr. Spees, I believe, will have forthcoming replacements for these. And that's part of that discussion he needs to have with all commissioners.
Okay.
So if you may, if I may, Mr. Chair, help you here with these that I have on hand and give them to you. We could do it in a slate if you don't mind.
Which seats do you have?
I have a female veteran.
A female veteran.
Miss Sharonica Mosley.
Okay.
And then I have the post-90 American Legion. You'll see it on the back of your Charles Miller. Mr. Miller would like to step down. And so we have applications on file for both of those. And I'm recommending to the board that we appoint both of those, Miss Mosley as the female veteran and the American Legion post by Matthew Dwayne Kafal.
And that we table the other 3 until our next meeting.
Yep.
Commissioner May, Miss Mosley, I believe is the wife of Coach Mosley. What I knew, James Mosley, he passed away a few months back. She was a naval officer. No, not her. Her husband, Coach Mosley.
You may be right. She is very much involved, and I think she's going to be an outstanding selection.
If that's who I think it is, and I'm pretty sure that's her, naval. Yep.
So that's my motion, is that we appoint these 2 individuals. One is the female veteran, Miss Mosley, and the other is Matthew Dwayne Kafal as the Granville County Veterans Affairs to Service Liaison, post 90, taking the place of Charles Miller.
I'll second that.
I'm just asking for some clarity. And is that the spouse of a veteran seat, or is that the female veteran seat?
The female.
The female, okay. So she's a veteran also? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to get some clarification there and make sure. Okay, you've heard the motion. Do I hear a second, or have someone already seconded?
I second it.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any questions? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, before you move off of this one, I believe that David Sella actually lives in District 3. He's not in District 6. He lives in Oxford address.
I think you're correct, Commissioner. He is in District 3.
Sella lives in.
He lives down at,
Okay.
Enid. He was in that area.
He is, and he was appointed to fill the vacancy in District 3, I think.
Okay.
He was one that brought it. Yeah, that's Sue's, it was Sue's district.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got that straight.
So the only thing we have left is the vacancy at law.
We have the District 7 seat, the spouse of a veteran, and the one at large. We have 3 open for.
Mr. Chair, here's the ones that remain open from that list. I don't think did we do the seat 1?
Yes.
Okay. District 7, did we do that one?
No.
Okay, that one. The spouse of a veteran is still open. We did not do that one tonight. We filled the female veteran. one at large in February. We did not fill that. And we did not fill the Moses S. Cash American Legion Post 161. All those, I believe, have potential candidates that will be proposed to commissioners and one to the clerk via the Creedmoor representative for American Legion Post for our March meetings.
Okay. Do we vote?
A number of those folks are coming off. That's
Okay. All right. We have a motion. We have a second. We've got clarification. Is there any more questions on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you. And that concludes our business for tonight. We have our county manager's report.
I don't have anything to report on this evening.
Okay, thank you. County attorney's report.
I've said enough.
So, no report from our attorney. He's spoken enough tonight. And presentations by county board members. Let's start with District 2. Mr. Commissioner Williford.
Nothing tonight.
Okay. District 3, Commissioner Griffin.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. District 4.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
District 5. 5 minutes or less.
I actually took the time to write some things down today, so but I'll make it in 30 seconds. The Campo Blueprint for Safety, we sent you guys out some information on that. I'd ask that you look at that. It's really interesting information. It's really good stuff. The important thing to walk away from that is that in District 5, in our transportation district, we are working to change the philosophy of being rather than reactive, in other words, waiting for a fatality, to taking proactive safety measures before that occurs. That is ongoing discussions now. We're hoping that this blueprint for safety will allow us to do that. Litter task force we put together today, it was really good. And thanks for those attending. We are going to do something about litter in the county. So I think that's got real legs. The Veterans Appreciation Banquet, March 1st, really would love for everyone to come. If you've never been, Mr. Griffin, it's awesome. And where it's going to be at South Granville High School. Get there anywhere from 1 to 2. The ceremony actually starts at 2, but get there 1 early, and you can mingle with some of the folks coming in. Commissioner Karen and I had a great conversation with Mr. Knott, so we've already covered that with you, but I think that's good, something we can report on more later. Fire Commission tomorrow night. If you're interested, I think it's always good for commissioners to come. A lot will be discussed, and it's always good to have for you to listen to it there, so when the proposals come to you, that you're more informed. This is really important. We've had 2 incidents in the last week that has occurred and brought to my attention by the public, where someone fraudulently tried to make a move on someone's deed. So we had literally got a call I got a call from a constituent a month ago about what are we doing about it. And we actually checked with the clerk, registered deeds, Kathy Taylor, talked to her, and they actually have some software on there now. You got a public information on it, but it's good for you to know. I highly advise you and the members of the public to register their property. If someone were to try to do something with your property, by statute, they have to, if it's notarized, they have to record it. But if you're registered with them, you'll get notified that someone has registered something made a move, or at least put documentation toward your deed. And so those instances that were reported to me, the citizens were advised to contact the FBI because there were telephone calls coming from out of state, and they were sending driver's license and things of that nature to try to enter into real estate contracts on other people's property in hopes that they would retrieve some earnest money.
And next, the safety, we had some really good meetings, school safety meetings, and all the good work that they're doing there. And thank you very much for letting me share that.
Thank you. District 6.
Really
Commissioner
quickly,
Carey.
I'm going to beat Russ's time. Brassfield Fire Department had a truck push-in ceremony on the 25th of January where they did not one but 2 new trucks. So they're pretty exciting stuff down there with Brassfield. And I don't think there's any way possible that had it not been for the fire tax that they'd be able to achieve that. So, good stuff happening down on the southern end. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just 2 items. I enjoyed the, I think it was last Friday. We went to board chair and vice chair in Raleigh. In our meeting, the first thing I think was come up on the agenda was code of ethics, and asking did all boards had a code of ethics, and the next one was a code of order. Asking everybody to go back and look and see, do you have a code of order? Some have and some don't. We don't know, but we need to check and see. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as for me, I've talked enough tonight. I'm like our attorney. I agree with it. Is there any other business to come before us tonight?
Mr. Chair, I did think of one quick update. Both Corinne and I will be attending our State Association Winter Conference Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so you won't see us in the office. If you need either of us urgently, try us on our cell phones.
Thank you. And if there's no other business to come before us tonight, we entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. Do I hear a second? We have a second. I don't think there's any discussion on this one. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I don't think anybody opposes. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.